So I have been getting a lot of memes about Impractical Jokers, specifically Murr, and how he gets the worst punishments on the show. Now, if you guys have never seen Impractical Jokers, it's a show where 4 lifelong friends do really embarrassing public challenges. Sometimes they have to go up to random people and whisper really creepy things. Other times they have to try and dip french fries in a stranger's food without getting noticed. The twist being that whoever fails the most challenges has to take a punishment at the end of the episode. Now, for the other 3 Jokers, Joe, Sal, and Q, these punishments aren't always that bad. Most of the time you'll see Joe doing something like a ribbon dance at a gymnasium, or Sal getting chased through a haunted corn maze. Their punishments are pretty funny and can get pretty bad, but none of them can compare to the sheer torture that Murr has endured. Maybe it's because they have an alliance or Murr's reactions are just funnier, but the other Jokers always seem to come up with exceptionally ruthless punishments for him in particular. Even though Joe isn't on the show anymore, a lot of people still talk about how in the older seasons, he and the Jokers absolutely violated Murr on a regular basis. I mean, look at this meme here of Benny from Fallout New Vegas being crucified. The joke here is that this is what Murr's punishments are like. However, the crazy part is it's not even that far from the truth. Murr's punishments are on a level that are borderline inhumane. Sure, they aren't all that bad, and some of them are definitely more chill, like when Murr has to give a speech on helium. That punishment is pretty embarrassing, but we wouldn't really call it torture, so to speak, more so just silly. But these moments of peace are few and far in between the unspeakable horrors that are deviously concocted by his so-called friends. Basically what happens when you fall asleep first at the sleepover. Today I'm going to go through some of the most infamous punishments, starting from the best to worst, and we're gonna see if the memes are accurate. Now, the first punishment on my list might not seem that bad to some of you who have done it before, but the Jokers decide that Murr must go skydiving. Now, this is something that a lot of people do for fun, but for those of you who have a fear of heights, it's probably one of the most terrifying things you can imagine doing, and Murr is no different. The Jokers told him that they would be filming a challenge like normal, but this was only to take him off guard. The moment that they let on that something is wrong, Murr instantly puts the pieces together and realizes what's happening. He freaks out, taking off his jumpsuit in protest and running in the other direction, mortified by what the Tenderloins might plan to do to him. If his circumstances were any different, he would probably just ditch them. But the thing about Impractical Jokers is that if you don't do a punishment, you're off the show. And so Murr crawls into the plane, barely accepting his fate. As the plane climbs up in altitude, Murr really starts to lose it. This man cries on the way up. He is not mentally prepared for this. Genuinely going hysterical while the Jokers are just laughing and having the time of their lives, knowing that they'll be safe inside the plane. As the door opens up, Murr is whimpering in terror, sitting on the edge of the plane for way longer than he probably wanted to. As he stares down, his instructor finally jumps and they just start falling. Now, personally, I'm not completely scared of heights. Like, I've gone on some pretty big roller coasters, but watching this makes my palms just a little bit sweaty. The free falling is just crazy to watch. If you guys have ever gone skydiving, please let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely interested in what it's like. This punishment was just pure torture for Murr. The whole time he couldn't stop screaming. I think a lot of people would probably calm down once the initial jump was over, but he just kept yelling all the way down. The thing about Murr is that he said in bonus footage that when he was falling, he basically always thought he was going to die. He had like an endless amount of worst case scenarios in his head he was constantly thinking of, even down to the last second of airtime. Like, he did not feel safe until he touched the ground. This punishment was absolutely brutal because it was the one thing that Murr told the Jokers he never wanted to do. And he even texted his family members goodbye before he went because he was that sure that he might not make it. If that wasn't bad enough, Joe actually decided to add insult to injury and actually did a callback by immortalizing the experience onto Murr as a tattoo. He actually tattooed a screaming ferret onto Murr's thigh in a different punishment to commemorate it. But maybe some of you aren't that fazed by this punishment. You might think that people go skydiving and get funny tattoos all the time. Where is the torture I was promised? Maybe you want to know what really makes Murr's punishment so bad. Well, I'm here to tell you that that punishment was only the tip of the iceberg for what we'll be covering today. Because when it comes to Impractical Jokers, things get very personal. Enter the exposing interview with Danica McKellar, something I can guarantee no one watching this has ever gone through. Now, you'll notice the theme of Murr getting faked out by surprise punishments continues here, as the Jokers are once again very deceptive. They tell him that he's competing in a bodybuilding competition in order to get him in his underwear and oiled up. As you can see, they shine up that ferret tattoo. Just regular friend stuff. Murr is already quite nervous for the competition that he thinks is coming, but what he doesn't know is that the Jokers actually have a much different idea in store. And on the other side of the door that he thinks he'll be competing in is actually his childhood crush. When Murr enters the room, he just starts laughing at how nervous he is to see her. He can barely process what's going on as the rug is pulled from his oily feet. Q said that if there was one person that Murr had a crush on over the years, it was Danica, and you can tell he's right because of the way that Murr doesn't know how to act. He's so flustered that he can't even read the interview questions, and that would probably still be the same without the underwear. Danica was definitely told to be as cold as possible, and you can tell it really gets to Murr. Every question that he asks just gets this response of vague disgust. It's like the original Bobby Altoff interview. When Murr is told to ask her what their baby would be named, she says a mistake. And it's just so cringe, I can't imagine what he was thinking. If that wasn't bad enough, the Jokers then make him squat and flex in front of her, and the eye contact is just a crime. I don't know why, but he actually really starts getting into it. By the time it's over, you can just hear Murr groaning and contemplating his life in the hallway. He's an absolute wreck. This punishment was especially bad because it was just so specific and personal. None of the other Jokers ever had to interview their crush, but that's probably just because they don't talk about them as much as Murr probably does. Really a rookie mistake when anything you say on this show will be used against you. Now, before we get into the more serious punishments, I wanted to give a few honorable mentions. At one point, the Jokers were inspired by the movie Taken and kidnapped Murr. They then had him stand beside New York in a Statue of Liberty costume. They have hunted him in a deer costume while shooting balls of urine at him. A custom human piñata costume was created so they could beat him with bats. He has been canonically tarred and feathered while chained to a bench. They have also shaved his head and eyebrows and then made him change his ID. These are actual supervillain activities. And then you just go to Joe and all he has to do is make awkward eye contact. They got Sal doing unfunny stand-up like it's the end of the world. Meanwhile, Murr is swimming with sharks trying to recover his passport. It's like he's going up against James Bond villains, but even the most dangerous situation that James Bond has encountered cannot compare to the final 3 punishments I've chosen. These are more cautionary tales than anything else, warning you of the deadly possibilities of having total a-hole friends. Piercings. People get them all the time. What could go wrong? Well, I want you to think long and hard about the worst place you think someone could get a piercing. The most painful spot you can imagine. Not that one, a little bit less bad. Think a little bit less bad than that one. After foolishly taking his safety for granted by failing one too many challenges, Murr is taken to get some piercings. Now, you guys are lucky that this video can only be found in 480p because this is graphic. If you consider yourself more faint of heart, you're free to leave. Go ahead, like the video, and then move on with your faith in humanity intact. But for those of you who want to witness pure evil, let's begin. Murr is brought into a familiar tattoo parlor, and this time a wheel is spun to dictate his fate. If Murr can answer 3 questions correctly, he will be spared. But for every single one that he gets wrong, he gets a randomly chosen piercing. Unfortunately for him, Murr got 3 questions wrong before he escaped, and as a result, got his belly button and both nipples pierced. He screams in pain as the Jokers are huddled together, having trouble even watching a work of their own creation. Hugh actually says that he's seen a lot of bad things, but they can't beat this. The ironic part is that Murr was actually given a lifeline. If he didn't want to get a piercing, he could simply go skydiving again. But after a quick flashback, he decides to just take this L instead, which just goes to show how much he hated that. This guy was probably in pain for weeks, but it's nothing in comparison to the final 2 punishments I have chosen. Things are really starting to get gross here, so excuse me if I don't go as into detail as I did with the other punishments. Trust me, you'll thank me later. By now, it's expected that the Jokers never tell Murr what he's in for. And in this punishment, he is only told he has to volunteer at a seminar. The person giving the seminar, however, is a doctor, and he is talking about the yearly physical exam. As Murr sits in anticipation, he remains confused. Finally, the doctor announces he needs a volunteer for a prostate exam. The entire group of people at the seminar is looking at each other like the doctor is crazy, but Murr knows what he must do, and he barely lets out a squeak, indicating that he'll do it. Murr then publicly gets a prostate exam done in front of a room of people. It is cruel, unusual, and possible that Murr went through the 5 stages of grief during this one. Oh, but Joe gets his house wrapped in polka dots. Yeah, you know what? That's way worse. What torment. Having to take that all down, it probably took him over half a day. I'm just kidding. Of course this is worse. There's a fine line between pranking and traumatizing someone. At this point, you're probably wondering how Murr is even still alive. When are these guys just gonna cut to the chase and drop a boulder on him? How could there possibly be a worse punishment than that one? A punishment which was probably outside of the realm of what you thought could be on TV. Catheter. They just straight up put a catheter in him. No twist, no creativity, just a straight up catheter. And then they make him zipline. I'm not making this up. They actually make him zipline with a catheter installed inside of him, purposely leaving a tree at the end so he has to abruptly stop himself. I don't even know how they find humor in these punishments anymore. These are would you rather for $1 million questions, and Murr is doing them for free. I'm done talking about these sick show and these evil Jokers. They need to leave Murr alone. Oh, but Q had to dress up as a clown. They burned his childhood blankie. Look, I'm not saying that the other Jokers didn't go through some pretty bad stuff. To be honest, they did have their own fair share of pretty horrifying punishments. But there is a reason that everyone agrees that Murr had it the worst. He just has way more of these nightmare scenarios. Even Meat Candy and made a video parroting the kind of stuff he goes through. And I feel like at this point in his life, nothing else could possibly ever phase him. Like, keep in mind, he did all this on national television. I can't see how anything else would embarrass him, but at the same time, the show is still going. Who knows, maybe they'll have Jigsaw on as a celebrity guest. With that, I conclude that the memes are accurate. But what do you think is the worst punishment? Do you miss Joe too? I miss Joe. If you like this video, I think you would love my video about Jordan Shalansky and Conan O'Brien, so go check it out as it would really help my channel, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, I'm Lufa.
Go, girl. I'm smiling. You got it. Let me see. Oh my God. Oh my